All right, so today we're diving into something I think we've all experienced. That super awkward moment when you just completely blank on someone's name. You know that feeling.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like at a party or a networking event, your brain just freezes.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're going to be checking out an episode from the English Podcast Zone on YouTube. It's actually geared towards people learning English, but they had some really good tips, even for native speakers like us, on how to handle those name forgetting situations.
I'm curious, what kind of stuff did they cover?
Well, they set up this whole scenario where two people, they called them Nick and Anna, they meet at a conference and then run into each other later. And of course, Nick can't for the life of him remember Anna's name.
Oof. I can already feel the secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah, it's painful just thinking about it. But they use this scenario to break down some key phrases that can really help you out in that moment, like, just to kind of smooth things over and make it less awkward.
Makes sense. So what was the first phrase they tackled?
The first one was in a bit of a hurry, which is kind of a classic, right?
Yeah, I use that one all the time.
Me too.
All right.
But the episode pointed out that you can use it even if you're not actually in a rush. It's like a polite way to excuse yourself from a conversation.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a little white lie to get out of a jam.
Exactly. They give the example, can you drive faster? I'm in a bit of a hurry. But you could also just be like, I can't talk right now. I'm in a bit of a hurry. If you need to wrap things up quickly.
It's all about those subtle social cues. Fascinating.
Right. Okay, so moving on. The next phrase they talked about was contact details, which at first seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows what contact details are.
Right, but they actually had a good point about how it's become about more than just business cards these days. What with social media and all the different ways we connect online.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Like, do you ask for someone's Instagram handle now? Or their
Mhm.
Discord? I mean, what even are contact details in 2025?
It's a good question. Maybe we need a whole separate deep dive on that. But anyway, the point is asking for someone's contact details can be a smooth way to get their name again without directly admitting you've forgotten it.
Like, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn. Boom. You've got their full name right there on their profile.
Exactly. Okay, ready for the third phrase? This one's a lifesaver. Slipped my mind.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It's perfect for those times when you've totally forgotten something, but you don't want to sound like a jerk.
It softens the blow for sure. Makes you seem a little less, well, forgetful.
Right, and I think it makes you sound more apologetic than just saying, I forgot. Like it acknowledges that you feel kind of bad about it.
I see what you mean. It adds a layer of, I don't know, empathy maybe?
Yeah, something like that. And the YouTube episode actually gives some good examples of how to use it naturally. Like, sorry, I forgot to respond to your email. It just slipped my mind. Or even, don't you know what day it is today? Oh, it's your birthday. It completely slipped my mind.
Ouch. That last one's gotta hurt.
Yeah, definitely don't want to use that one on your significant other. But anyway, the point is, slipped my mind is a pretty versatile phrase, even beyond forgetting names.
Okay, so we've covered three great phrases. In a bit of a hurry, contact details,
Mm.
and slipped my mind.
Yep, those were the main takeaways. But they also had this whole section on what they called fluency builders, which are basically phrases that can help you sound more natural and comfortable when you're speaking English.
Interesting. So these are like tips for sounding more fluent, even if you know all the basic vocabulary.
Exactly. And the first one they focused on was around here or around there, which seems simple enough,
I
right?
mean, yeah, it's pretty basic. What's so special about that?
Well, they actually went into some pretty interesting distinctions between the two. Like, they said if you ask, is there a bank around here? It implies that you're looking for something in the general vicinity.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you said, there's a great restaurant right around the corner, it creates this sense of like immediacy and specificity. Ah, I see. So it's all about those subtle shades of meaning.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then there's around there, which is even more vague. Like, Los Angeles is a great city. I used to live around there.
Yeah, that's way more general.
So it's fascinating how just changing that one little word can shift the meaning and the tone of what you're saying.
It's like a secret code.
Right. All right. So the last fluency builder they covered was terrible with. And this one's all about being self-deprecating in a kind of humorous way.
Oh, I love that. Like, I'm terrible with names.
Exactly. Or terrible with directions or terrible with technology. It's disarming. It's relatable. It can even be a conversation starter.
Because the other person can jump in and be like, oh, me too. I'm always getting lost.
Exactly. It creates this instant connection. So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here with these everyday phrases. But the YouTube episode actually went a step further and shared a personal story about forgetting a name that was both hilarious and relatable.
Ooh, I love a good story. What happened? So the host of the YouTube channel, Marco, was at a family reunion, and he completely blanked on his uncle's name.
Oof, that's got to be rough,
Yeah.
especially with family.
Right, and he's talking about how he awkwardly danced around the name all night, just calling him uncle, because he didn't know what else to do.
I've totally been there. Sometimes you just got to embrace the awkwardness.
Which is exactly what Marco did. But then get this, he ended up just asking another cousin for his uncle's name.
Huh. That's brilliant. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best.
Right. And you know what's funny? In that initial scenario with Nick and Anna that we talked about earlier, Anna actually asks Nick for his card. Which is pretty clever, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Smooth move. It's a natural way to get someone's name without being like, hey, I totally forgot what your name is.
Right. So there are definitely ways to handle these situations gracefully. But sometimes you just gotta laugh at yourself and move on.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more prepared for my next awkward encounter now. Thanks to the English Podcast Zone.
Me too. But hold on, there's even more to unpack from this episode. We've got more fluency builders, some interesting insights into why we forget names in the first place, and even some tips on how to improve your memory.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive into part 2. So we were talking about those fluency builders from the English Podcast Zone episode.
Yeah.
What else did they have?
Oh, yeah. Well, another one they highlighted was the simple greeting, how's it going?
Oh, interesting. Seems pretty basic, though.
I know, right? But they actually pointed out that it sounds more casual and less formal than just saying, how are you?
Ah, I see. Like, it's more friendly and approachable.
Exactly. They even played an audio clip so you could hear the intonation and everything. It's like those little details really make a difference in how you come across.
Yeah, tone of voice is everything sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, what other fluency builders did they have up their sleeve?
Well, this one was less about a specific phrase and more of a strategy. They talked about how if you've totally blanked on someone's name, asking for their business card can be a smooth way to get that info without making it super obvious.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic move.
Right. Like you can just be all, hey, I'd love to hear more about your work. Do you have a card?
Exactly. And then, boom, you've got their name right there.
Problem solved. Although I guess these days not everyone has business cards.
That's true. Maybe you could ask for their email address instead.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Hmm.
Most email addresses include the person's full name, so you're good to go.
Speaking of good to go, I think I'm going to start carrying business cards again, just in case I run into this situation.
That's not a bad idea. You know what? Actually, thinking about that story we discussed earlier about Marco forgetting his uncle's name at the family reunion.
Oh, yeah, what about it?
Well, I have a confession to make. It wasn't actually my family reunion.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it was Marco's from the YouTube episode. I kind of embellished it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I've totally been in those situations where I've blanked on someone's name and just resorted to calling them dude or buddy all night.
Oh, my gosh, me too. It's like your brain just goes completely blank.
I know, right? And the worst part is you start overthinking it, and then it's even harder to remember.
Totally. It's like the more you try to force it, the further away the name slips.
It's so frustrating. But you know, I think these experiences actually make us better communicators in the long run.
How so?
Well, they force us to think on our feet and find creative solutions, like asking for a business card or just owning up to our forgetfulness.
That's true. It's all about being adaptable.
Right. And most importantly, I think it reminds us that it's okay to not be perfect. We all have those moments where we stumble over our words or forget someone's name. It's part of being human.
I love that. Embracing our imperfections.
Exactly. And it makes us more relatable, too. I mean, who wants to hang out with someone who's always got it all together anyway?
Not me. Give me someone who's real and authentic any day.
Exactly. Okay, so we've explored these specific phrases and strategies from the English Podcast Zone episode, but I think there's a bigger question lurking beneath the surface here.
Ooh, I like where this is going. What you thinking?
Why are we so prone to forgetting names in the first place? It's like our brains have no problem remembering faces, but names, those are slippery little suckers.
That's a great question. And there's actually a lot of research on this, like cognitive psychology stuff.
Really? I'm all ears.
Well, it turns out that names are processed differently in our brains compared to other types of information. Like faces tend to be processed holistically, where we take in the whole image at once.
Okay.
But names are processed more analytically. We focus on individual letters and sounds.
So maybe that's why a face can trigger a flood of memories and emotions, but a name just feels like a label.
Exactly. And to complicate matters further, names often lack inherent meaning or connection to the person themselves.
That's true. It's not like their profession or their hobbies, which give us more context.
Right. And then there's the social pressure we often feel to remember names, especially in professional settings.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't help.
It's like that feeling when you're trying to remember something, and the harder you try, the further away it seems to slip.
Ugh, tell me about it. But you know what? Thinking about it that way, maybe forgetting someone's name isn't necessarily a sign of disrespect or lack of interest.
I think you're right. It's often just a quirk of how our brains work,
Yeah.
or a sign that we're maybe a little too preoccupied with other things.
Exactly. And as we've discussed, there are ways to navigate these situations gracefully and even turn them into opportunities for connection.
So true. Like, a little bit of self-deprecating humor can go a long way.
Absolutely. So I think as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway is this. Forgetting a name is a universal human experience. It's not a reflection of your intelligence, your social skills, or your worth as a person.
It's just a brain fart. We all have them.
Exactly. And as we learned from the English Podcast Zone episode, there are plenty of strategies and phrases you can use to handle these situations with grace and even humor.
So next time you find yourself struggling to remember a name, take a deep breath and remember, you're not alone.
And who knows, maybe you'll even discover something interesting about the quirks of human memory along the way. Like, why are we so good at remembering faces but not names? It's a question worth pondering.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still more to explore.
I'm ready for part 3.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the why and the how of forgetting names, but let's bring this back to our listeners. What can they actually take away from this deep dive?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that those key phrases we discussed, like in a bit of a hurry, contact details, and slip my mind, they're not just for English language learners.
Yeah, exactly. These are tools anyone can use to navigate tricky social situations.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you don't want to sound like you're reading from a script. It's all about using these phrases naturally and authentically.
Right. Like the English Podcast Zone episode emphasized the importance of tone and delivery, too. It's not just about the words themselves, it's about how you use them.
Exactly. It's like you can say, I'm in a bit of a hurry, in a really sincere way, or you can say it in a way that's like, okay, got to get out of here.
Uh-huh. Right. Context is everything.
And beyond specific phrases, there are also those broader strategies we talked about. Like, remember Anna asking Nick for his card? That's a perfect example of thinking on your feet and finding a natural way to get the information you need.
Right. And I think that adaptability is a valuable skill in general, not just for remembering names.
Totally. But even with the best strategies, sometimes you just blank. And in those moments, it's all about embracing the awkwardness.
Absolutely. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just laugh it off, use one of those clever strategies to recover and move on.
Easier said than done sometimes, but I think it's good advice.
It is. It's funny because this English Podcast Zone episode was really geared towards language learners, but I feel like there were so many great takeaways for anyone who's ever felt that pang of social awkwardness.
Oh, for sure. It's a reminder that language is powerful. It helps us communicate, but it also helps us navigate the complexities of human interaction, which can be pretty messy sometimes.
Well said. So I think to wrap things up, the big takeaway for our listeners is don't be so hard on yourself when those memory lapses happen.
They happen to everyone.
Yeah.
And when they do, use it as a chance to practice your social agility and have a little fun with it.
And hey, maybe you'll even learn something about yourself and how your brain works in the process.
Exactly. Because why are we so good at remembering faces, but not names? The world may never know.
That's a mystery for the ages. But in the meantime, I think we've given our listeners some good food for thought and some practical tips to try out in their own lives.
Definitely.
So until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring the fascinating world of language and all its hidden depths.